All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third Fair Farms webinar for 2023. And I've tricked you a little bit. I have called it Managing Mental Health and Wellbeing, but as the new code of practice for managing psychosocial hazards in the workplace has recently been released by Work Health and Safety Queensland, I thought we'd kick off with that one because we have some obligations as employers to now manage these psychosocial hazards in the workplace. Okay, and then we'll move on in the second part of the discussion to farmer wellbeing, which is really what I'd like to focus a bit on. So in terms of the requirements under the Work Health and Safety Queensland Code of Practice 2022, employers have an obligation to manage the risk of I know I'm going to get this wrong 100 times, psychosocial hazards at work for your employees. Now, this is a statutory and ethical duty under the Code of Practice, and like those other duties for identifying physical hazards and dangers, you need to identify your psychosocial hazards. That is identifying the signs of stress and what may be causing those signals, responding to the hazard, and ensuring that your responses are as effective as they can be under the circumstances. And then in the second part, I want to look a bit at growers looking at their own psychological and mental health. Okay, in terms of the big stats, well, I never like to do them, but we'll do them anyway. On average, there's almost 8,000 Australians are compensated through the various compensation schemes for work-related mental health conditions each year. Psychological injuries have longer recovery times due to the nature of those injuries, and therefore they often cost a lot more money for the employer, and they usually mean more time away from work than for physical injuries. And almost 10% of all serious workers' compensation claims are for work-related mental health conditions. So we can see that there's a growing number of people now. I think now that these provisions are available, we need to be aware of what our obligations are. So your PCBU, as you might be aware, is the person conducting the business or undertaking. So in other words, the employer in this regards. So the duty of care under the Work Health and Safety regulations to manage psychosocial risks, a duty holder must identify reasonably foreseeable hazards that could give rise to psychosocial risks, eliminate those risks so far as is reasonably practicable, and that is what is practical under the circumstances. And if it's not reasonably practicable to eliminate those risks, then minimise the risks as far as is reasonably practicable. You need to maintain implemented control measures so that they remain effective, and you need to review and, if necessary, revise those procedures to ensure that they're working. The worker duty of care under the regulations includes taking reasonable care for their own health and safety, including their psychological health, taking reasonable care that their acts or omissions do not adversely affect the health, including the psychological health and safety of other persons, their workmates or staff, and comply so far as the worker is reasonably able with instructions given by the employer, and to cooperate with reasonable health and safety policies or procedures issued by the employer that have been notified to workers. So in other words, you need to make statements, you need to monitor actions, and you need to ensure that that your responses to those hazards and risks is both reasonable and effective. Now, we put a bit of disclaimer in here because this relates to organisational issues. So PCBU, so employers are not required to manage personal health issues or stresses that are not work-related, that is family or personal or financial issues. However, where a worker does choose to inform their employer of a pre-existing injury, or if you otherwise know of the pre-existing injury, they should ensure that psychosocial hazards do not create further harm. So again, it is where there is an identified pre-existing situation, you might need to take extra steps. And remember, we don't know what anybody else is feeling. Everybody is different, everybody feels different things and responds and reacts to situations differently. So that little image there was just designed to give you an idea of what goes on underneath the surface. So let's look at the definition. A psychosocial hazard is a hazard that arises from or relates to the design or management of work, a work environment, plan at a workplace, or workplace interactions and behaviours. In severe cases, exposure to these hazards can lead to death by suicide, and psychosocial hazards can create harm through a worker's experience of a frequent, prolonged and or severe stress response, where stress is defined as a person's psychological response, e.g. anxiety, tension, and physiological responses, the release of those stress hormones causing cardiovascular responses and the like, so heart attacks and what have you. So effectively, psychosocial hazards and risks are situations within the work environment that have the potential to cause psychological stress. Prolonged stress may lead to psychological or physical harm, and there is the potential for it to contribute or even cause work-related injuries. It's far more likely that workers will make a mistake, use poor judgment, or feel extreme fatigue. And there is also a higher risk of suicide to those experiencing prolonged work-related stress. I can imagine some of you are sitting there saying, that would be me. Some of the contributing factors that we look at to give you a bit of an idea to what to look out for. High or low job demands, that is really, really busy or not enough to do. Little control around how their job is done or little clarity. Poor organisational change, if you go about changing how things are done and not letting people know adequately. Poor organisational justice, where people feel that there's favouritism or that people are treated differently depending on who they are or what they do. Low reward and recognition, poor workplace relationships. Remote, isolated work, environmental conditions, traumatic events, fire, flood, etc., violence and aggression at work, bullying, harassment, and poor support. That is, that there's poor support for workers. And some workers may be more at risk than others, and that includes those who have limited work experience, young workers, apprentices, trainees, and I guess some of our backpackers. If they have particular barriers to understanding the information, either through literacy challenges or languages. If there are perceived barriers to raising safety concerns, so if workers feel that they're in a precarious employment, they're not sure that they should raise anything for fear of getting into trouble. There are certain attributes that can often affect people's willingness to speak openly about particular issues that are causing them stress at work, and an existing or previous injury or illness which may prevent them from performing their full duties. So there'll be some people who require a little more attention than others from time to time. And this is what it sounds like. These are the kinds of comments, if you begin to hear these kinds of things, it's not fair. I don't want to talk about it. I'm feeling burnt out. I'm so emotionally exhausted. I can't sleep. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. All of these are the voices and the sounds of psychosocial hazards. It's important that you hear and listen to these sounds, because once you start hearing them more than once, you will have an issue. Our risk management approach is the same as it is with the other, i.e. the physical hazards. And that is, we take the 4-step approach, which is to identify those hazards. What is going on in the workplace that is causing so much stress for people? We need to assess the risk. So how much, pardon me, how much of an issue is this really? Is it causing long-term stress or long-term effects on workers, or is it just because of peak harvest? Is it something that will be be over in a week or two? You need to work out how you control those risks. If those risks are presented by people, then you need to figure out how you're going to manage those people to alleviate or mitigate or even remove those risks. If it's related to things like workloads or overwork, how do you actually relieve that risk in order to attend to the psychosocial impacts. And obviously you need to review your control measures regularly to ensure that they're working. So like your physical work health and safety hierarchy of risk management, we use a similar approach here. It's wrapped around here with consultation and management commitments smack in the middle, which means that management is committed to taking this kind of approach. So how to identify psychosocial hazards? I mean, people get very busy on farms, but you can identify them by, one, always taking a very calm and open-minded approach. Again, people react differently to things. Something that you think may be a relatively small matter may in fact have a massive impact on somebody else on the other side of the fence or doing a different job. So it's really important to be calm and open-minded. You need to talk and listen to your workers. They're going to tell you what's going on. They're not just whinging about stuff. I mean, maybe they are, and you will be able to determine that once you've actually had a chat with them to work out what's causing them so much stress. Inspect the workplace and take note of how your workers are working and how they interact with each other, with their managers and their supervisors. Oops, I'm just going to go back to that one for a moment. Review reports and records, and use a survey tool to gather information. And we've got some really good resources, not complicated, straightforward, to help you with gathering that information. Observe your workplace. So hazards arise, remember, from organisational-wide systems, practices, environments and behaviours. So observe the workplace. How is the work performed? Is it rushed? Is it delayed? Is there a backlog of work to be done? How do workers, supervisors, managers and others interact? Again, are they professional? Are they polite? Or are they intolerant and belligerent with each other? How are conflicts managed? Is there shouting, pouting, silent treatments? Or is there a process that's obvious to be used and that people are using it? And does your workplace culture support or tolerate inappropriate behaviour? Even something as simple as an inappropriate calendar in a machine shed. Do you allow people to get away with stuff because it seems too small a deal to actually raise? It is the small things when they gather steam and gather numbers that begin to call you problems. And don't forget, if you've made any changes that affect staff, did they know? Were they aware? Nothing worse again than being surprised. So when we're assessing the risks, it's really important to consult with the workers. So look out for, when you're talking with your workers, look out for their reactions and their responses. You may come across people who are clearly and obviously, stressed or emotionally exhausted by workload, but they might also be silent, unwilling to engage, and some of them, their response will be, this is not my problem. So those types of reactions when you're talking to staff and raising issues are all pointing towards a problem. If they're anxious or scared about working with someone in particular, or a customer or a client, if they're feeling humiliated or degraded or undermined by a supervisor or a manager, or by an action, for example, bullying or sexual harassment or other inappropriate conduct. Are they confused about their roles? Have they been properly trained? Are they clear about their priorities, about the expectations that you have for them? Or are they feeling like a failure for being unable to meet unrealistic expectations? So some of this is looking backwards as well as forwards. Are they concerned about inadequate job training or information, or about understaffing and overwork? The other thing is to have a look at your records. So look at your leave records. Are people taking lots of leave? Are people absent for seemingly, no reason or minor reasons, or for periods at a time? Personal leave, sick leave, carers leave, annual leave, workers' compensation claims. Have a look at those. Are there claims coming across for these types of issues? Are people leaving without telling you why? Grievance information. Have you had a lot of disputes? Are there incident injury reports? Are people not taking care of business and causing themselves injury? Do you have an employee assistance program? Check with them. They won't tell you the details, but they might tell you how many people have called in the last 6 or 12 months. Again, use workplace surveys to your benefit. Timesheets. timesheets and overtime payments. As I said, look at your turnover data, and you should have some anonymous reporting provision at your workplace for your workers. That may well turn up some revealing information as well. So as we said, we look at the hierarchy of risk control. For the same way that we look at physical risks, we also look at this model for our psychosocial risks. So again, eliminate the risks. That's your first step. Can we eliminate the risk? If the risk is involving a person, you may not be able to eliminate that risk, but you may be able to retrain that person and certainly get them up to speed with how you want things handled around these issues at your workplace. Substitute, isolate, or some other engineering control. So if noise is an issue that's causing people stress, I know if I have too many noises going on in my background, I feel anxious. So, you know, there may well be a good engineering control or even a piece of PPE to manage noise. Or is there an administrative control? And you'll find a lot of those issues dealing with people are policy and procedure issues. So you should have a code of conduct. You should have a bullying policy. You should have a sexual harassment procedure so that people are aware that the procedures and the policies are there to protect them as well as you. And obviously the last resort is always personal protective equipment. So again, we use the same approach that we use in the hierarchy to eliminate physical risks. We do the same thing when we're looking at these type of psychosocial risks. So how do we respond to complaints and reports of psychosocial hazards? Again, remember, I guess this works throughout. We do not know how our actions might impact others unless we ask the question. So encourage reporting every employees. If they feel that something's not working either the best way it could or is working particularly against them in some way or is causing, you know, barriers or blockages to productivity, listen to them and get them to talk to you about it the same way that you get them to talk about the other work health and safety matters. Respond and act promptly. So that is, treat all matters seriously. Do not do not think that people are just having a bit of a whinge. Treat those matters seriously and with some respect, and you will find that you will get a lot more information. Ensure immediate safety and use appropriate responses or seek professional advice assistance. Again, if you have an EAP, an employee assistance program, you can refer your employees. You can refer them to Lifeline, or you can just sit down and have a bit of a chat with them. Maintain confidentiality at all times, be neutral, and as far as possible support all parties if the dispute or if the issue involves more than one. Do not victimise people when they come to you for advice or support, and keep records, always keep records. So responding to incidents of workplace violence and aggression, I wanted to add this one because some of these stresses are related to these kinds of behaviour. If any worker or anyone at work is in immediate danger, call the police. Don't hesitate. Don't think it's not appropriate. If someone is in danger, if someone is threatening physical danger, then call the police. Firstly, ensure everybody is safe and if necessary, retreat to a safe space. Stay calm and ask the aggressor to leave the premises or the property, but stay calm and if necessary, leave the area yourself. Provide any first aid or medical attention where required. Follow your emergency procedures. These will give you the best guidance as to what to do and provide support to those employees who may be stressed. Okay, so that's kind of the obligations under your work health and safety code of practice for managing psychosocial risks at work for employees. But I really wanted to look at, you know, when people appear with personal problems as well. So the code of practice deals with organisational stresses, not personal ones. But if an employee is showing signs of distress, maybe not related to work, and bear in mind our last discussions around domestic violence leave and the like, you should still use the approaches set out in the code of practice. But it is entirely up to the employee if they want to share their issues. If those issues are clearly affecting performance on the job, this is on a timed slide I've just worked out, a structured discussion to see what can be done to assist your employee is advised. You know, whether they need a bit of extra time off or some leave or a referral to the EAP or just some additional buddy support at work. So have a chat with them. Again, it's entirely up to them if they raise those matters with you. But continued poor performance, even if it is related to psychosocial hazards, personal as opposed to workplace, without any improvement, could lead to a more formal procedure if productivity or other workers are impacted. And it's always wise to seek professional advice if you're faced with that situation. Okay. Now, I do want to do a little focus on farmer mental health because I have discovered a really wonderful resource that I wanted to share with people. And in all of these codes of practice, work health and safety and workplace relations, the focus is always on the employee. So I wanted to shift some of the focus in today's webinar across to the growers themselves. And the reason for that is in 2021, 46 farmers didn't make it home for dinner. So each one was somebody's child, partner, or somebody's parent or other family member. So the Australia's 2022 Safer Farms report has shown 19 fatalities and 86 injuries in Queensland, compared to New South Wales, which recorded 10 fatalities and 23 injuries, and 6 fatalities and 13 injuries in Victoria. Queensland is quite clearly leading the pack, and this is not a good thing. So it's really important. And while, you know, a lot of these are related to more physical things like tractor turnovers and you know, quad bikes, like in this gruesome picture here. The truth of the matter is that we don't really know the stats for suicide amongst our growing community. Often we don't even know that it's occurred. So I thought that it was timely to, you know, to talk about growers. Now, up front, I want to say if you're experiencing any of the following, it's important that you seek some professional help. If you're feeling really down or stressed, for more than a couple of weeks at a time, or to the point where it's interfering with your personal life or your work life, you can't work properly, or whatever. If you're having thoughts about ending your life or hurting somebody else, if you're having relationship problems, using large amounts of alcohol or other substances to just try and cope, if you're not sleeping well or your sleep patterns are disturbed, if there are dramatic changes in behaviour, I can't get out of bed, or I'm reacting really badly, like feeling unusually angry at yourself or at others. Sometimes we feel powerless to deal with these strong feelings and these physical symptoms. Sometimes we feel useless, as though we're just not worth much as a person. Sometimes it's numb and empty and unable to enjoy any activities that you may have previously enjoyed, whether that's golf or playing with the kids. Enduring painful emotions and feelings of tension, agitation, and being on edge. Restricting yourself socially, not wanting to go anywhere, not wanting to talk to people that you would normally talk to, hearing voices, or having thoughts about harming others. These are all things where if you feel any of these or many of these, we would strongly urge seeking advice. And certainly if you're talking to anybody who's using these kind of words or talking in this kind of way, that would be the best advice that you could give that person as well. So this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. And one of the tragic things I discovered is that farmers die of suicide at twice the rate of other employed people, and are half as likely to have seen a general practitioner or a mental health professional in the last 6 months compared to non-farming counterparts. As I said, those are just the known cases. Their concerns expressed about being away from the farm for any length of time to deal with it. That is why they take so few holidays. There is a real reluctance to complain. Despite all of the whinging farmer tropes you may hear, there is a genuine reluctance. There is a genuine reluctance to complain, especially about oneself, and there are concerns about privacy, particularly in small communities. While we know Australian farmers are resourceful and good practical problem solvers, life on the land is tough, and especially as our growers' livelihoods are determined by many things which are beyond their control. We also know this, that maintaining positive health and well-being is fundamental to our ability to work productively and achieve our business and personal goals. We face challenging times, whether it's floods, cyclones, drought, bushfires. Um, and it is claimed now that these are a foreseeable part of the Queensland lifestyle. That is, we don't really expect things to get much better, and it's always possible that they will get worse. It is absolutely natural to experience a range of emotional and physical responses when dealing with challenging times and financial stresses. You are not alone, but it's also important to acknowledge and understand what is in and out of our control. Recognizing the signs, understanding the effects, and taking positive steps towards managing both the situation and your response is vital. Bearing in mind, most of us have families, and that is possibly the worst news a family could receive. And I put that one in there for most of us who are a little bit control freaky. The one thing it's taught me is worrying about things you can't control is a waste of energy, but it's also dangerous. When your mind is elsewhere, and that is when you're thinking of a whole heap of other things and you're not focused on the job at hand, this can have serious ramifications for your safety. And the Queensland Workplace Health and Safety website contains a number of videos from growers and other workers who pretty much talk about complacency as being one of the greatest dangers. There's never a wrong time to act when you're feeling this way. So I want to talk a little bit about this resource, and it's called iFarm Well, and it's a practical online toolkit. It's all free, and it helps Australian farmers manage life's challenges effectively and get the most out of every day. It was developed by Australian farmers. It was developed for Australian farmers. They worked with growers, hundreds of growers, to talk to them about why they don't seek help, what kind of help they would accept, and what this website needed to look like for growers. So I'm going to praise this endlessly. Um, in 2021, they surveyed about 123 people and asked them what makes it difficult for them to access these professional support services, especially for mental health. And the barriers that the growers talked about in that report is their belief that stress is an acceptable part of life and that their problems are not so serious. There was a strong desire to maintain control and not to rely on others for help. So there's that self-reliance that is so well known and understood. Some difficulty understanding some of the concepts from their doctor and their health professional. So stress may be an acceptable part of life, and sometimes a bit of stress is a good thing for getting you motivated, but too much stress is a dangerous thing. And your problems are as serious as anybody else's. And the other thing that was raised, of course, was just that distance to assistance. But it's really, in the 21st century, in 2023, it is so easy to get help across a range of platforms and forums. They also talk on this website, Farmers Wellbeing, about improving your thinking clout. And they talk about these 5 training modules that they have put together. They're relatively short. They're only about 30 minutes each. They're written in farmer language, so they're really, kind of straightforward, practical modules, including taking stock of your current well-being. So there is some practical strategies to get you started. So it just allows you to have a think about how you're actually feeling and get those thoughts down. Module 2 talks about thoughts being like bullies, so how to spend less time in your head. Sometimes we simply cannot escape those many, many thoughts that are rolling round and round in our head, and if we can't escape them, we can't solve them. Module 3 talks about doing what really matters. My mother used to say, don't sweat the small stuff. So this is about how do we get the most out of a busy life without focusing on the minutiae. Module 4, training your attention muscles. So that is focusing on the here and now. You don't have much control over too much more. So it's a less exhausting place to be when we think about what we're doing right now. And then Module 5 helps you to put it all together and helps you to move forward. These are great modules, and I would really urge people, when they can grab half an hour or an hour, to pick one of these or more of these up and just see what they can do for you. Now, they did an evaluation of this, and I thought it was useful to share this as well because they followed some growers 6 to 12 months after they had done these modules, and they surveyed about 228 of them. Pre to post intervention, farmers' distress significantly decreased and mental well-being increased, and these effects were maintained at 6 months follow-up. So improvements were greatest, obviously, for those who started the modules with high levels of distress and low mental well-being. But the report was extremely positive, that even some of the most reluctant growers to do this kind of thing were happy in the end to do it because they were so tailored to their own needs, they spoke their language, and they provided practical insight and support and assistance to move forward. The other thing, I guess, is also lending a hand to a mate. I am always told that helping others is a good way to help yourself. You take your mind off yourself, and you also can share, some of those things that are driving you mad. So remember, there is a "Are you okay?" We don't need to do that just in the week where it's a national campaign. We can do that every day or every week. So again, all of these resources are available on the iFarmWell website. And as I said, there's plenty of templates, plenty of resources, and plenty of ideas for how to start difficult conversations. Now, I didn't really want to do this, but I think it's important that perhaps we just think about suicide, given that the numbers are a bit gruesome. And I kind of liked this, that like waves, thoughts about suicide come crashing in and then pass. They usually only last a few hours and they're more common at night. These thoughts will try to trick you into thinking there's no future, that you're isolated, and that even people would be better off without you. And this is never true. So if you have these thoughts, or if you know someone who is having these thoughts, it's important that they seek out the company of someone as soon as possible. They shouldn't be left on their own. If you can't see somebody in person, phone them, or call one of the numbers that we've provided at the end of this slideshow. Remember, you or they are not the only person who has felt like this. Your friends are likely to have had tough times, and with farmers, your grower mates are also likely to have had tough times in the past, and they will want to help you even if you think otherwise. Give away or destroy anything in the house or around the farm that could make it easy. Alcohol and other drugs feed these thoughts and make them worse. If you don't mind a drink in the afternoon, think about using no alcohol or low alcohol alternatives. It just makes things worse. I think we all know that. But remember that once these waves of thoughts have passed, you'll look back and wonder how the thoughts ever seemed to be so strong and powerful, and you will get your strength back. And this is a little exercise, and I actually want to do this now at the end of this session. We've got 3 minutes to go. So when you're feeling, not if, but when you're feeling overwhelmed, I find this a particularly effective method of just slowing my brain, slowing my physical kind of reaction to things, and just giving me a moment to stop and think. And that is, you take 3 slow, deep breaths. So do that now. Breathing in, 1, breathing out, breathing in, and breathing out. Breathe in deep and breathe it out. Now, notice 3 things that you can see, whether that's a painting or a wall or a piece of paper. Notice 3 things that you can smell. Is the puppy dog there, or the cat, or the kitchen, or the coffee? And notice 3 things you can hear. Is there a vehicle, farm machinery, buzzing in your ears? And notice 3 things you can feel, whether that's the shirt on your back, your feet on the ground, your hands on the desk. And then take another 3 slow, deep breaths. What we hope that does is just refocus your mind back to where you need to be. I hope you've gained something from this, not only from understanding your obligations towards your workers, but bear in mind that we're always thinking of our growers, and our concern lies as much, if not more, with them when they are managing their workers. So if that exercise has helped you, keep it in mind and share it around. We have some really useful resources here, including the Code of Practice. I would recommend that you read that as you would read your normal codes of practice under work health and safety. I would strongly advise that you check out that iFarmWell website. We've supplied some podcasts there, again from iFarmWell. They just will take you through managing particular types of stressful issues. There's one there for a free online tool to help the businesses identify, assess and manage those. And then, of course, there's Beyond Blue and Lifeline if things are getting really heavy duty or really serious for you. So I hope those resources are useful. I just want to thank and recognise the contribution made by these following bodies, because I must confess I plagiarised all the information from these. So WorkSafe, Queensland, WorkSelf, Australia, FarmSafe, iFarmWell, Safer Farms and the Queensland Mental Health Commission. I hope you have found today's webinar of use. I'd be happy to take questions if there were any, although I don't, I'm not sure if there are questions in the thing. Okay, if not, you know where to find me. I'm here. We will be providing this link to you, so that feel free to share that around. And thank you again for joining me. And we will see you next Wednesday of next month, the last Wednesday of next month. Thanks very much, everybody. Be safe and be well.